I decided I'm not doing the Frasier intro this time, because this episode doesn't have anything to do with Seattle. I did think of something else that seemed appropriate for this episode though. Because I'm so well versed in The Last of Us Part 2's story since I first played it nearly 5 years ago, Jesus Christ, I really need to stop saying things like that out loud. I oftentimes forget that going through the first chunk of that game for the first time was very weird. Yes, I was deeply invested in the gameplay and I thought that Joel's death was one of the most horrifyingly impactful kicking off points to a sequel I'd ever experienced, but I cannot deny that I was a bit sceptical about where the story was going and something felt very off. It wasn't until it began flashing back to the unseen events of the 5 years Joel and Ellie spent in Jackson that I finally realised what the story was doing. It was giving me a Pulp Fiction style narrative where information would be withheld from me about the past and certain characters until the timeline would catch back up to them. Despite him being killed off in the intro, there was still a story to tell with Joel. As opposed to the game's method of splitting these flashbacks up and spreading them across the narrative, here in the show we get an entire episode dedicated to a flashback, which I think most people predicted was going to be the case. We get an episode that's structure is not too dissimilar to that of the Bill and Frank episode of season 1, where we get to see a whole arc for two characters over the course of one episode as we go through each of Ellie's birthdays in Jackson and how Ellie began distancing herself from Joel. But before we get to any of that, we need to talk about the big beautiful mustachioed elephant in the prologue, because we get this really interesting intro of young Joel protecting Tommy from getting in trouble and possibly battered by their dad, who's apparently a bit of a hard arse, played by the unmistakable Tony Dalton, which firstly is just absurdly good casting as Joel's father, and secondly, they knew exactly what they were doing with this casting choice as well. Like, having Tommy be terrified of his father only for Lalo Salamanca to walk through the fucking door, they have good reason to be scared of that nutcase. But seriously though, this scene did actually surprise me, because what I initially thought was going to be this quick little bit of insight into Joel's protective nature going as far back as his teen years turned into a surprisingly nuanced moment about the difference between discipline and abuse, and how people perceive it differently depending on where you come from and how you were raised. As soon as Joel says to his dad,
"You're not gonna hurt him,"
his dad's entire purpose in the room changes. He has this moment of realization that maybe he's been taking his perceived limit of discipline too far. But as far as he's concerned, he's actually been doing things the better way because he's not nearly as violent as his father was. It's one of those unfortunate realities about the cycle of abuse and what society accepts as appropriate discipline throughout different times. But in this instance, he does consider that maybe his approach to things is still too far. So by the end of the scene, he takes a different one. Instead of scolding Joel or Tommy to any capacity, he instead just explains how he has genuinely believed that he is doing things the better way, and hopefully Joel, and I suppose by extension Tommy, can do better than him should they ever have children of their own. And he just pats his son on the shoulder before he goes back to work. It's a surprisingly impactful intro that I did not expect to have as deep of a significance as it would wind up having. I do think that the framing of going through each of Ellie's birthdays in Jackson is a great motif to move time forward throughout the episode. Unlike in the game, and this is one of the benefits of being in the television format, we actually get to see more of the down-to-earth moments of Joel being a dad that you wouldn't be able to do in a video game. Like him desperately scrambling to get a cake in time for her birthday, which is a nice but also kind of depressing callback to how he forgot the cake for Sarah back in 2003. I absolutely love how Future Days remained in this version of the story despite being completely anachronistic for this timeline. Because who fucking cares, alright? The song just fits too perfectly for the theme of The Last of Us Part 2. It's impossible to imagine it without it. I know I gush a lot about the production and the art design of this series, but the museum is fucking mental. It's absolutely spot on, like 1-to-1, and I think it is bullshit that we did not see a single hat get put on a fucking dinosaur. Initially, I did think to myself, alright, maybe they just didn't have the budget to build the entire dinosaur exhibit part of the museum. But no, because I found out afterwards that they did build that whole part, and again, it's fucking dead on. Why would you not want to show that? I honestly think it's quite a shame. The amount of work that must have went into building that fucking place, and you're not even going to show it? Come on, man. Maybe it was a time problem or something like that, but you're seriously telling me you couldn't squeeze in 45 seconds of Ellie just excitedly running through a room full of skeletons, just to give a quick showcase to honour the work your incredible production team put into this? Still looks amazing though, regardless. Outside of that, I actually like how we get to see the more typical father-daughter friction even before the big truth bomb comes out, with Joel's old-fashioned mentality and Ellie's desire to be more independent and have her own space. Remember, Sarah died when she was like 12, and Joel closed himself off for about 20 years after that, so his idea of having a child and how they act and behave as they grow up is a bit frozen in time. But Ellie's attempt to distance herself from Joel isn't just the typical radical teenage angst attitude. It's because the more time she spends with Joel, the more something reminds her of the Salt Lake situation. She never completely believed his story, but she chose to believe it, because you always want to believe somebody that you love and you care about, even if it sounds like it's not the truth. So she chooses to believe him in good faith and tries to move on without expressing her true feelings. But it keeps eating away at her, and she can't muster the strength to ask him about it. Which is what finally leads us to the Eugene situation. Cypher himself, Francis Fratelli, Luigi Gottarelli, Ralph Cifaretto, Joe Pantoliano. The last one was his real name, by the way. Also, Ellie, how do you recognise him? You've got a Matrix poster in your room. Specifically the one with Joe Pantoliano on it. Now, if that's no proof that we're living in a simulation, I don't know what is. Now, I've been eagerly anticipating this moment since they established the mystery of it back in the first episode. And I will admit, the actual revelation wasn't really anything too significant. He just gets bit a bit far out of town and Joel does indeed kill him. I thought something else was going to be revealed, like Eugene was into some serious trouble with somebody outside of Jackson or something like that. However, the way that they use this situation to have Ellie basically confirmed that Joel was indeed lying about the Fireflies was so brilliantly done. Eugene knows he's gonna die. Like, he knows he's lost the great game of tag that everybody's playing in the world of The Last of Us. I mean, except for Ellie, of course. And the one thing that he wants before he dies is a few final words with his wife, Gail. What I love about this situation is that it's Joel being put in a much smaller scale situation, and again, it's one where you could make a decent argument for both sides. There's probably enough time to take Eugene to speak to his wife at a safe distance before he succumbs to his infection. But on the other hand, you could see it as more of a mercy to put an end to the situation now and spare Gail the pain of having to quickly come to terms and say goodbye to someone and risk the safety of others. Fucking hell, most people in Jackson would probably take Joel's side in this situation. But once again, it's not really about the choice he has to make, it's about the lie he chooses to tell. Like any parent, Joel is just trying to spare his child from the tougher decisions in life by lying about his intentions, but Ellie is able to detect it. For as reckless and impulsive as Ellie can be, she does have a surprisingly good intuition about people. Ever since Joel told the big lie, he's never had any other reason to tell any sort of lie to Ellie. He's been able to be completely authentic and sincere about everything else with her, and Ellie's gotten used to that now. So in this moment when Joel says,
"Get the horses, bring them down the trail. I'll start walking with him. We'll meet up with you. I promise."
She just gets that familiar feeling she had when Joel made his last big promise. And once again, because you always want to believe the ones you love, she trusts him and runs to get the horses. Joel leads Eugene to a more blissful area, and despite being quite conflicted, manages to pull the trigger. And of course, Joe Pantoliano is just reliably amazing as ever. Two awesome, well-performed, heartbreaking cameos in the same episode. This is all the evidence that Ellie needs to know for a fact that he was talking a load of shit at the end of season 1. And listening to him lie to Gail's face is just the last fucking straw for her. Interestingly though, she doesn't get the full truth out of him just yet. She has the confirmation that he lied to her, which is obviously solidified by her saying, "You swore," not "you promised," like he said with Eugene, but "you swore."
You swore. Swear to me.
I swear. Swear to me!
Joel knows exactly what she's referring to with that. And for the following 9 months, he just has to deal with the simmering thought. Is this destroyed forever? The whole reason he lied in the first place was because that's what he was scared of. The idea of Ellie turning against him was such a terrifying thought, he lied about the one thing he knew was so important for her. So he just spends the next 9 months having presumably just this very workman-like relationship with Ellie, only interacting for practical reasons and whenever they ran into each other in Jackson, leaving everybody else to wonder what the fuck is going on between they two. Right up until the New Year's party. I do like that we get to see the party again, not just because it's from Joel's perspective this time, but because we now have full context for the situation. Which of course now leads us to the scene outside of Joel's house, which honestly, my brain is still trying to process. Back in episode 1, when we had this little moment of Ellie walking past Joel's while he's sitting outside the house playing the guitar, I was like, alright, interesting, we're teasing this scene this early on, alright. But when Ellie re-entered the frame when we came back to it in this episode, I was like, oh, we're doing this now, are we? Alright, I see. And this is the sort of thing that I've been alluding to when I've been saying, how the fuck are they going to structure this gargantuan storyline? Because this is the final scene only being shown to us after everything that happens in the game. And yes, that does include what will likely be the events of Season 3. Which, I mean, to be fair, part of me did suspect would happen, because it would be absolutely mental to have this scene take next, or potentially even another season to get to. But at the same time, I find it so hard to imagine this scene not being at the very end of this story. Maybe I'm just too used to it being there at this point, but I can't picture the final moments of Part 2's story without flashing back to this scene before the credits roll. And what's even more fascinating about it is it isn't just that scene, it's been spliced with a separate scene from the game where Ellie basically threatens the truth out of Joel. Which, even as I say that out loud, sounds wrong and like I should feel extremely negative on it. I love both these scenes, so the idea of minimizing their individual impact by amalgamating them should be a problem for me. Should be. That being said, I don't know if it was just the tip-top direction of the episode or the sheer raw commitment of Ramsay and Pascal's performances, but this fucking hit. My mind might change on this eventually when I go through all of this again when it's done, but as of now, I think this scene is fucking mesmerising. I love the decision to let Ellie ask the questions and just have Joel responding with these painful nodding gestures. They are both brought to breaking point in this scene, and Joel tells Ellie the actual truth for once.
But if somehow I had a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
But the line that truly brought this scene and really the whole episode together was Joel bringing back this devastating line.
I hope you do a little better than me. Well then, I hope you do a little better than me.
And that's officially my cue to propel myself out my bedroom window in a completely non-life-threatening manner. Don't worry about me, I only live like one up. Seriously though, what I've always loved about having this scene at the very end of this long and arduous journey is that up to this point, you have been led to believe that Ellie's last interaction with Joel was at the party before she witnessed his death the following day, and that's what's fueled her fire the whole time. But just before the game's closing moments, you're given this flashback to when Ellie actually decided to talk to Joel after her outburst. And it plays out mostly the same as it does in the series, minus the original confession. It's Ellie coming to the reality that no matter how much she resents Joel for what she did, she still cares about him, and because he shows no signs of not caring about her, it's impossible to ignore. Holding a grudge is so much easier when you can perceive the other side as just awful. But Joel isn't all awful. He goes out of his way to make himself the best dad possible. He genuinely cares about Ellie and she sees and feels that. So she decides to pry a bit more, and he even goes the extra mile of honesty by saying that if he was given a second chance in that moment, he would have made the same decision. He's saying that even though Ellie thinks her life doesn't matter unless she sacrifices it for the betterment of the world, her life already matters, because a world where Ellie doesn't exist is a world not worth living in to Joel. Everyone in the world could become immune, survive, start exterminating the infected more efficiently, rebuild society, brew the best mountain coffee from the hills of Columbia, and begin production on Curtis and Viper 5, but it still wouldn't be worth it to Joel. He's already felt the pain of losing one daughter and spent 20 years learning to close himself off from getting attached to anyone for fear of feeling that amount of suffering again. And then Ellie tried to stab him in the kidneys, and thus the bonding journey began. Despite his best efforts to shut it out and push it away, he eventually rediscovers the cathartic, rejuvenating feeling of being a father. But with it comes the newfound ability to commit extreme acts of violence in the name of protecting said love. And this is something that Ellie, and indeed most people in the world, fundamentally can't understand, at least not at this point in her life, not until, as Joel said, she should ever have one of her own. But Ellie is still willing to try and forgive him. They didn't leave things off on terrible terms and had only just begun to move forward to the idea of reconciliation, which for Joel was so significant and a huge moment of catharsis, because the fact that she wanted to just try and forgive him was enough for Joel to know he hadn't lost her forever. But for Ellie, it was the cruelest trick the universe could have played on her. She spent such a long time resenting Joel and not spending any time with him, not knowing what precious little of it there was left, only to make an attempt to move forward the day before he's killed. For as much as I'm glazing this moment, I'm still kinda perplexed as to what their plan is for when they get to the end of this story. That's not happening anytime soon, mind you, but I really struggle to think about the end of this story without this final scene being there. I feel like it would be pretty cheap if you just flash back to this moment again, but I don't know, maybe they've already got something else in mind, and I am fascinated to eventually find out what that may be. I feel like I am starting to understand a little bit more what they're going for with this season. They're not having Ellie's first 2 days in Seattle be as grueling as it is in the game, because they've decided to keep that more grim stuff for the latter episodes of the season so it can be more of a shock for the audience, which maybe does work better for the episodic TV week-to-week format. I still feel like it's all a bit too condensed and we've taken a little too much time to get to certain places. The fact that we only have 1 episode left for this half of the story is still just mind-boggling. And to be fair, they could do quite a lot with this finale, because in the game, Day 3 of Seattle is mostly just gameplay, but that doesn't mean it's light on notable events. Before I leave this off though, I want to throw a theory out there for the last episode. Now, I don't think that this is actually going to happen, but it's an idea that's been floating around my dome for quite a bit now, and I just wanted to share it. And this is major spoiler stuff, so if you haven't played the game, now is the time to run for your safety. I'll give you a second. Alright, so if you've played the game, you'll know that at the end of this half of the story, Ellie, Jesse, Tommy and Dina all converge at the theatre, and just as they've all agreed to leave Seattle, Abby catches up to them after discovering all your pals are mincemeat, and our big hunky love Jesse bites the bullet, and that's where things are left until we go through Abby's 3 days in Seattle. Now again, I do not think this is going to happen, and I'm only being half serious about this, but what if Jesse doesn't get killed in this moment, but Tommy does? I do not know why, but ever since episode 4 and I realised that they weren't going to have Tommy go to Seattle in pursuit of vengeance like he does in the game, and therefore minimising his role in the story, and even though he does survive to the very end of part 2, I've had this inexplicable odd sense of concern for Tommy the more this season has gone on. Maybe it's just because of how much I liked him in the first couple of episodes, maybe it's because they've given him his own child in this version of events, or maybe it's just been his lack of presence in Seattle. I don't really know why I'm thinking this, because again, I want to stress, I didn't even think this is going to happen. It's just this bizarre thought I've had in my head. Also, while I'm in spoiler mode, I might as well mention, ever since they confirmed that this second season would only be half of the story, I have been thinking that they would have to do some sort of alteration to its ending, because it would be fucking wild to end on a cliffhanger of that magnitude, only to have your 3rd season be a story from a completely different perspective. How the fuck would you even market that? In the game it works because you can keep playing at whatever pace you want, but this could take 2-3 years to come back to. I mean, it would certainly be ambitious, but fucking hell.
We let you both live, and you wasted it.
If you have last words for her, I'll pass them along.
I'd stick a shish kebab up your ass.